Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Pakistan's Army Chief General Javed Bajwa has reiterated that peace in Afghanistan means peace in Pakistan. He said this during a meeting with Afghan envoy to Pakistan Najibullah Ali Khail, who called on him at the General Headquarters in Rawalpindi. The Army Chief said Islamabad's sole aim is to help Afghanistan become a peaceful, sovereign and democratic country. The envoy hailed Pakistan's efforts for regional peace and stability. The Russian defense minister has ordered troops to return to their permanent bases after the completion of drills near Ukraine's border. Ukraine welcomes the development but said it would remain vigilant. In recent weeks, Russia amassed nearly 100,000 troops near eastern Ukraine, where the government forces are fighting rebels. India has recorded the world's highest single-day spike in COVID-19 cases with more than 314,000 infections. The country has also registered its record 2,104 fatalities in the past 24 hours. Pakistan has reported over 5,800 cases and 98 deaths overnight as the toll approaches 16,700. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3 million lives and infected over 143 million people. President Joe Biden has announced the goal to halve U.S. carbon emissions by 2030 as he welcomed 40 global leaders to a virtual summit on climate change. In his address, President Xi Jinping said China will phase down coal consumption as part of its efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Army Chief General Javed Bajwa has reiterated that peace in Afghanistan means peace in Pakistan. He said this during a meeting with the Afghan envoy to Pakistan, Najibullah Ali Khail, who called on him at the General Headquarters in Rawalpindi. The Army Chief said Islamabad's sole aim is to help Afghanistan become a peaceful, sovereign and democratic country. The military's media wing said the two sides also discussed matters of mutual interest and regional security situation. The visiting dignitary hailed Pakistan's efforts for regional peace and stability. Ankara says the foreign ministers of Afghanistan, Pakistan and Turkey will hold talks in Istanbul on Friday. This comes after a wider Afghan peace conference was postponed because the Taliban denied to participate. In a statement, Turkey's foreign ministry said the three-way meeting would cover recent developments. It said the meeting would cover the Afghan peace process, cooperation in security, energy, connectivity and irregular migration. Meanwhile, the United Nations says it will ramp up efforts for a just and durable peace in Afghanistan. In a tweet, the UN mission said the delay in the Istanbul Peace Conference provides an opportunity to work on the Doha talks. The government troops and the Taliban both claim they have inflicted casualties on the other in their latest attacks. The Afghan National Army says 7 Taliban fighters were killed and 8 others wounded in an airstrike in northern Balkh province. For their part, the Taliban claimed responsibility for an attack on a security checkpoint in the province. The government officials confirmed the killing of 8 soldiers in clashes that ensued after the Taliban attack. The two sides continue their attacks amid the stalled peace process, even after the U.S. announcement that it will withdraw troops by the 11th of September. The Russian defense minister has ordered troops to return to their permanent bases after the completion of drills near Ukraine border. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky welcomes the announcement but said Kiev will remain vigilant. In recent weeks, Russia amassed nearly 100,000 troops near eastern Ukraine, where the government forces are fighting rebels. The military build-up had alarmed the West, with NATO urging Russia to withdraw its troops. Russia and Ukraine accuse each other of fueling tensions in the conflict. Kiev estimates has killed 14,000 people since 2014. Russia says it will retaliate against any new punitive steps by the Czech Republic against its diplomatic staff. The development comes as a spy row between the two countries threatens to escalate into a new round of expulsions. Earlier, the Czech Republic threatened Moscow that it will expel 60 more Russian diplomats from Prague. It also told Russia to call back the 20 Czech diplomats booted by Moscow. Czech Foreign Minister Jakub Kulehnek said if Moscow's decision is not reversed by noon, Prague will go ahead with the expulsion. Prague had expelled 18 Russian diplomats over alleged involvement in an explosion at a Czech ammunition depot in 2014. At least 4 Syrian soldiers have been wounded in Israeli airstrikes on Syrian military targets near the capital Damascus. The Syrian army said the strikes also caused material damage, while most of the missiles were intercepted by its air defense. Earlier, the Israeli army said it has hit a Syrian missile launcher and air defense systems after a missile attack near its Dimona nuclear reactor. An Israeli military spokesperson said the Syrian missile was fired at Israeli aircraft but overshot its target and landed in the Dimona area. The explosion near Tel Aviv's secretive nuclear facility also triggered warning sirens. Arab coalition in Yemen says it has intercepted and downed an explosive-laden Houthi drone over southern Saudi Arabia. In a statement, Saudi state media said the drone was fired towards Khamis Mushait. Meanwhile, Houthis claim they attacked King Khalid Air Base in Khamis Mushait. A spokesperson for Yemeni rebels said the drone hit an important military site accurately. The Houthis have kept up regular cross-border attacks on Saudi Arabia and a ground offensive in Yemen's Marib region. Earlier, U.S. envoy to Yemen said the battle for gas-rich Marib is the biggest threat to peace efforts. The UN's nuclear watchdog says Iran has installed extra advanced centrifuges at its underground facility. This comes as world powers are engaged in talks in Vienna to revive the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. In a report, the International Atomic Energy Agency verified 8 cascades of 2 different classes of centrifuges at the Natanz plant. Earlier, the European parties noted progress in the first 2 rounds of the talks, but warned of major hurdles. The diplomats also condemned escalatory measures by any actor that could jeopardize the progress. Meanwhile, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps released drone footage of the U.S. aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf. Turkish state media says Washington has formally removed Ankara of its F-35 fighter jet program. It says the U.S. and 8 other countries have abolished the 2006 deal regarding the F-35 program. The media said the 9 countries have signed a new memorandum that has excluded Turkey. Turkey is one of the main suppliers of the warplane's parts. Pentagon spokesperson Jessica R. Maxwell said U.S. position has not changed. She said the U.S. continues to move forward with the process of formally removing Turkey from F-35 partnership as announced in 2019. Washington have threatened Ankara with expulsion if it did not reverse its purchase of the Russian S-400 missile defense system. France has defended a military takeover in Chad despite objections from their opposition. This comes a day after the son of Chad's slain leader, Idriss Déby, took over as president and dissolved the parliament. Under the constitution, Speaker of the National Assembly should have become the interim president, but after the military had shut down parliament, the Chadian speaker said he had agreed to a military transition. In a statement, Haroun Kabadi cited security concerns for not assuming the position. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said Kabadi's position justified the military taking control. Meanwhile, Britain has condemned the killing of Chad's leader and called for an end to violence. Ethiopian Human Rights Commission says an armed group has taken control of the region that includes the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The commission said the armed group also reportedly killed civilians and kidnapped public servants from the Benish-Gulgumuz region. Witnesses say some officials were kidnapped by the armed group. The region has seen a surge of ethnic violence in recent months, including an attack in December that killed more than 200 civilians. The United States says it has seen no evidence of a withdrawal of Eritrean troops from Ethiopia's Tigray region. Earlier, Eritrea had assured that they would pull out their forces from the region. At a press briefing, State Department spokesperson Ned Price urged an immediate and full withdrawal of the Eritrean troops. Price said Washington believes the withdrawal is critical to restoring peace and security in the war-torn country. Talking about Chad, he said the U.S. is gravely concerned over violence following the death of President Idriss Déby. The spokesperson said the U.S. wants to see a peaceful transition of power to a civilian-led government. He noted Washington would be concerned by anything that stands in the way of a democratic transition of power in Chad. In the U.S. state of North Carolina, police shot dead a black man in his car while serving him with a search warrant. State officials say they have opened up an investigation into the incident. Protesters took to the streets following the shooting in Elizabeth City near North Carolina's coastal border with Virginia. At a news conference, Pasquotank County Sheriff Tommy Wooten said the officer who fired the gun has been placed on administrative leave. This comes a day after former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin's conviction in George Floyd murder trial. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. India has recorded the world's highest single-day spike in COVID-19 cases with more than 314,000 infections. The country has also registered its record 2,104 fatalities in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3 million lives and infected over 143 million people. More in this report.
Amid the shortages and the adverse effects of vaccines, now bogus doses seem to be a new problem. U.S. drug maker Pfizer confirms that suspect doses of its vaccine that were seized in Mexico and Poland were fake. Reports say the doses were going for as much as $1,000 a shot. Meanwhile, the U.S. Drug Regulatory Authority has slammed unsanitary conditions at a Johnson & Johnson's vaccine production plant. The U.S. has also added at least 116 countries to its Level 4 Do Not Travel Advisory list, citing very high COVID-19 cases. Down south, as Argentina crosses 60,000 COVID-19 deaths, authorities say the country is facing its worst moment of the pandemic.
Argentina is going through the worst moment of the pandemic. Since the start of the pandemic, since March 3rd of last year, this is the riskiest time because even though we have a strong health system, even though we have health workers that are vaccinated, we have an increase in the number of cases. That threatens to overwhelm the health sector. And we have concerning strains circulating that raise the risk of infection and fatalities.
International medical charity Doctors Without Borders has urged rich countries to stop blocking a patent waiver plan that could boost global vaccine production. This comes as India plunges into a tragedy of unprecedented proportions, with a staggering positivity rate of over 32%. A number of charities are helping the country's COVID-19 stricken population, which is facing a crisis of food scarcity as many cities remain under lockdown.
The biggest problem people are facing this year is that the family members in a house are testing positive of COVID-19. So I believe it is the responsibility of Gurudwara's management committee to provide free food to positive patients and families who cannot cook food at their homes. The free meal services at the shrine are going on, but this is a separate food for the patients only.
Meanwhile, Greece plans to start the rollout of Johnson & Johnson's vaccine on the 5th of May after EU's drug regulator backed its use.
In Pakistan, 98 more people have lost their lives to COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the countrywide death tally is now approaching 16,700. The ministry said more than 5,800 people tested positive for the virus overnight. It said the positivity rate is 10.16%. The caseload has crossed 778,000, out of which more than 676,000 people have recovered. Officials say there are nearly 85,000 active cases in the country, while more than 5,400 of them are in critical condition. Pope Francis has promised Lebanon's Prime Minister designate Saad al-Hariri that he will visit as soon as possible. In a statement, the Vatican said the pontiff urged political forces in Lebanon to put aside differences for the good of the country. It said Hariri, who is set to meet with Italian leaders during a short visit, held talks with the Pope for about 30 minutes. Speaking to the media afterwards, Hariri said that the Pope will visit only after the new government is formed. Both he and President Michel Aoun are locked in a standoff over the formation of the government. Lebanon is facing a severe economic crisis with the local currency losing nearly all its value against the US dollar. Indonesian President Joko Widodo has ordered optimal search and rescue efforts for a missing submarine and its 53 crew. In a televised speech, he said the crew was the main priority of the search and expressed sympathy to their family members. Earlier, Indonesia's Navy said it has not detected any signs of the submarine, but a Navy spokesperson said the sailors aboard the submarine have enough oxygen to last until Saturday. Neighboring countries, Singapore and Malaysia, have deployed vessels and crews to aid in the search operation. The 44-year-old submarine went missing on Wednesday while conducting a torpedo drill north of the Bali Island. The European Parliament will vote on the post-Brexit trade deal on April the 27th. Earlier, the EU leaders refused to ratify the pact due to British changes in Northern Ireland trading arrangements. Parliamentary committees last week backed the trade deal by 108 votes to 1. Parliament faces an end April deadline but has said it wants to see Britain move on implementing the Northern Ireland Protocol. If there is no vote this month and provisional application of the agreement was not extended, then the trade deal would cease to apply, leaving Britain and the European Union to trade with tariffs and quotas. President Joe Biden has announced the goal to halve U.S. carbon emissions by 2030 as he welcomed 40 global leaders to a virtual summit on climate change. The two-day summit begins with the U.S. seeking to reclaim lost ground in the fight against global warming. This report has more.
Speaking at the White House, Biden said the U.S. represents less than 15% of the world's emissions. He added that the world needs to act in this decade to avert the worst consequences of the climate crisis.
We must try to keep the Earth's temperature and to an increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. You know, the world beyond 1.5 degrees means more frequent and intense fires, floods, droughts, heat waves, and hurricanes, tearing through communities, ripping away lives and livelihoods.
Addressing the summit, President Xi Jinping said China will phase down coal consumption as part of its efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. He said Beijing will control coal power generation projects, limiting the increase in coal consumption in the next 5 years.
China will strive to peak carbon dioxide emissions before 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. China has committed to move from carbon peak to carbon neutrality in a much shorter time span than what might take many developed countries.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called on the world leaders to formulate concrete plans in the fight against climate change. In his speech, the UN chief urged the heads of states to create global coalitions for net zero emissions by 2050.
Mother Nature is not waiting. The past decade was the hottest on record. Dangerous greenhouse gases are at levels not seen in 3 million years. Global temperature has already risen 1.2 degrees Celsius, racing towards the threshold of catastrophe. Meanwhile, we see ever-rising sea levels, scorching temperatures, devastating tropical cyclones, and epic wildfires. We need a green planet.
Other world leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, also pledged to cut gas emissions. This is the first big climate meeting of a critical year that will culminate in a gathering of around 200 world leaders in Glasgow in November at the UN-led conference.
EU's observation service says 2020 was Europe's hottest year on record. Scientists issued a stark reminder about the devastating impacts of climate change ahead of the US-led Earth Day summit. They say it was the hottest winter at 3.4 degrees Celsius above the average temperature seen during 1981 to 2020. Meanwhile, the Arctic suffered a summer of extreme wildfires, partly due to low snow cover. The temperature in Arctic Siberia last year broke records by a large margin at 4.3 degrees Celsius, above the average. As per the World Meteorological Organization, 2020 was also one of the planet's 3 hottest years on record. As more and more countries join the push towards green energy production, one of the world's largest solar hybrid projects is nearing completion in Thailand. More in this report.
After years of criticism for reliance on fossil fuels, Thailand is exploring renewable energy production. In the country's northeastern province, close to 145,000 solar panels are being set up on the surface of the water in Sirindhorn Dam. The soon-to-be-completed 7 solar farms cover some 300 acres of water area.
Now, our current progress of the project is at 90% completion. The project area is divided into 7 platforms of floating solar cell panels. Now we've installed 5.5 platforms. There are still 1.5 platforms to work on, which we expect to complete by the end of April. And we think we will be ready to distribute electricity with this by the end of June 2021.
The state-run Electricity Generation Authority is touting the pilot project as one of the world's largest hybrid hydro-solar power ventures. Authorities are aiming to complete the project in June.
In terms of power generation, there are limitations when it comes to solar power. So we eliminated these limitations by continuously generating power via a hybrid system. Aside from that, we utilize everything we have here to make the best use of each component. We have space on the water surface, we have a hydropower station with a high voltage power transmission system. And with that combination, it will make the cost of power generation per unit lower.
According to the latest power development plan, Thailand is aiming to draw 35% of its energy from non-fossil fuel sources by 2037. State authorities plan to replicate the pilot project at 8 more dams over the next 16 years.
NASA says its Perseverance rover has extracted the first sample of oxygen from Mars. The 6-wheeled robot converted a sample of the planet's carbon dioxide into oxygen through an instrument aboard the rover. NASA says the conversion can open up possibilities for further experimentation towards the goal of human life on Mars. In a press release, it termed the conversion quite modest at 5 grams equivalent to 10 minutes of breathable oxygen. According to NASA, the red planet's atmosphere comprises 96% carbon dioxide. In Hong Kong, a professor has developed a program using role-playing robots to help children with autism improve their social skills. The initiative has been adopted by other non-profit groups and schools as well. More in this report.
The Robot for Autism Behavioral Intervention Program is designed for people with autism between the ages of 3 and 18. It aims to help them be more social and to resolve issues such as conflicts and bullying. More than 1,200 children have been using the program since its launch in 2015.
It's Bean. He finished my snacks.
These individuals with the autism, they have low motivation interacting with the human beings. And also they have the hypersensitivities to the sensation around the world. For example, the human facial expressions or the human voices. So we use the social robots to teach them the social skills in order to reduce their anxiety.
The robots engage the children with the role-playing and verbal interaction. A typical class involves 2 small robots acting out social scenarios, helping the children see the difference between appropriate and unacceptable behavior, such as tantrums or screaming.
She is now more active, such as asking people what their names are and who they are. She has started to have some degree of social life, and also her speaking skills have improved from saying single words to using vocabulary in forming sentences. The credit goes to them, the robots, and the team.
More than 20 non-profit groups financed by governments as well as public schools in Hong Kong and Macau have adopted the program since 2016. In the long term, Catherine so hopes her program can fight the exclusion of people with autism.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. A new Dutch research into the movement of dinosaurs has revealed that keeping up with the Tyrannosaurus rex was not difficult. The study says that unlike the popular movie incarnations, the giant meat-eating beast most likely ambled around at human walking speed. Details in this report.
A latest Dutch research indicates that the idea of time traveling back to the era of the Tyrannosaurus rex may not be that bad. Through a computer, reconstructions of muscles and ligaments on a 3-dimensional model of Trix, a female T-Rex skeleton. Dutch researcher Pasha van Bijlert has concluded a shocking yet relieving finding that the dinosaur's preferred speed was most likely 4.61 kilometers per hour. It is close to the walking speed of humans and horses. Bijlert and his co-researchers say the T-Rex's huge tail played an important part in its locomotion.
We've just published a paper in which we estimate Trix's preferred walking speed. We did this based on a reconstruction of the tail, and you just have to look at the tail to understand how important it is for its walking. It's more than half of its length. The walking of dinosaurs was unique because of its tail. There's no animal alive that uses the tail in the same way.
By calculating the natural frequency of the dinosaur's tail, the researchers were able to conclude its step rhythm and from that, its walking speed. However, it is too soon to assume that a human could have outrun a T-Rex. Researchers say they are still exploring its possible top speeds.
So the entire tail, by our reconstruction, almost 1,000 kilos, was really just a mass supported by a rubber band. And with every step, it would slightly bounce up and down. But you can see that if I choose the wrong rhythm, it costs a lot of effort for very little result. Whereas if I choose the correct rhythm, I suddenly get a lot of movement for very little effort. That's resonance. So, if T-Rex chooses the correct step frequency, the tail movements will be maximal. This maximizes energy storage and therefore walking efficiency.
Meanwhile, scientists have discovered the remains of a previously unknown species of dinosaurs in the world's driest desert, Parshid Atacama, located in Chile. The plant-eating dinosaur lived millions of years ago among the lush greenery in what is now a moonscape of rock and sand.
And other business updates, the Wall Street stocks have declined as investors turned a blind eye to solid earnings and economic data. The market remained lower after a better than expected reading on weekly jobless claims. The Labor Department said the first-time jobless claims have reached over 500,000. The S&P 500 traded fractionally lower, while the DJI index was also down over 0.25%. However, the Nasdaq Composite rose by over 0.1% at open. Meanwhile, the oil prices have surged despite a surprise buildup in the U.S. crude inventories. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.